All right, let's move on to a slew of lawsuits filed against a lot of prominent people, but also a lot of non-prominent people. But a lot of prominent people are what we'll focus on today. In New York, these are all civil lawsuits for sexual harassment and sexual assault. One of the most noteworthy here, let's put this up on the screen. Rapper and entrepreneur Sean "Diddy" Combs accused of sexual assaults in 2 new lawsuits. This comes after he had just settled a separate lawsuit with singer Cassie last week after she had leveled some pretty stunning allegations about sexual assault that had occurred over many, many years. Those 2 fresh suits filed to New York's Supreme Court on Thursday allege that he had drugged and sexually assaulted one woman in 1991 and attacked and sexually assaulted another in 1990 or 1991. By the way, his representatives had not commented in this piece as of the time it went to publications. So one of the suits was brought by Joy Dickerson Neal. She alleges Combs drugged, sexually assaulted, and abused her after a date in New York City in 91. She also says that he drugged her before videotaping himself sexually assaulting her. The second suit, in which the claimant is unnamed, alleges that Combs and a friend forced her into having sex after a party. It also claims that Combs later visited the claimant's home and physically assaulted her, choking her until she passed out. In addition, as I mentioned before, Cassie had reached a settlement on November 18th, the day after she filed a lawsuit accusing him of physical and mental abuse that spanned roughly a decade. Terms of the settlement were not disclosed. They first met in late 2005 when she was 19 years old and he was 37. Combs' lawyer labeled Ventura's claims, Cassie's claims, outrageous lies and said she was seeking a payday and to tarnish his reputation. Now listen, none of us knows the facts of what unfolded here. I will say though, with all 3 of these stories, you have the use of drugs to, sort of compel behavior and enable sexual assault. Those are common elements in all 3 of these accusations. And with Cassie, she also had some contemporaneous or some backup to some of the claims. One of the claims that she made is that she had tried to leave Sean Combs and she was dating this other rapper, Kid Cudi. And Combs became enraged about this is again according to her, and threatened to blow up Kid Cudi's car. And lo and behold, Kid Cudi's car blows up in his driveway. And by the way, they asked him in this report, hey, is this true? And he said, every word of what she said is accurate.
Yeah, how wild is that? Is that he came confirmed on the record. He's like, yeah, no, my car, what? Car bombs? This is totally nuts.
Wild.
But all of it fits. And Krystal, if you can, really break this down, because I tried to read about it and I'm trying to understand, is that the Survivors Act, that's what's the Adult Survivors Act, allows a filing with a look back period to MeToo, but it's not criminal, it's all civil. So then what are the, what's the burden of proof for a jury to find like a determination against you? What are they supposed to look at?
So it's a preponderance of evidence versus, in a guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So it is a different level of, evidence that you have to offer and a different standard in a civil case. This is actually interesting, this law that has enabled all of these suits to be filed. And this is why there was a rash of them that came out, because the law had a 1-year period where basically people who had, wanted to claim sexual assault, where they could file these lawsuits even though the statute of limitations had expired. So you had 1 year to do this. And so all of these suits came in underneath the deadline. One of the more famous suits that you all, I'm sure, are aware of that was filed with regards to this law was E. Jean Carroll's suit against Donald Trump. That's what enabled her to be able to file this civil suit during this period, even though the statute of limitations had run. So I looked into some of and by the way, I think there is good reason to think that part of the reason this law was passed and signed into law by Governor Kathy Hochul was specifically because of the E. Jean Carroll allegations. But I will also say I looked into this a little bit. So before 2019, there was only a 3-year statute of limitations applied to civil suits for sexual misconduct in New York, which does seem really short, especially given what we know about the psychology of survivors at this point. Then in 2019, New York extended that statute of limitations for civil suits arising from sex crimes against adults to 20 years, but the extension wasn't retroactive. So you had this change where it used to be 3-year statute of limitations, then they changed it to 20, but it wasn't retroactive. So this was kind of like a middle ground attempt for people to have some ability to seek justice for past sexual assault allegations, but not over an indefinite period. You just got this 1 year. If you want to file, you can file, and then it's over, and you move forward with the 20-year statute of limitations. So that was the thought behind it. It's called the New York's Adult Survivors Act that was signed into law by Kathy Hochul.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was trying to think about it. I kind of agree that 3 years is definitely not far enough. But the evidentiary burden and so much of what we have with MeToo, and even if you think about, I mean, not even E. Jean Carroll, but you zoom out, about the idea of like juries in a civil trial litigating sexual assault and all of that. Obviously, we have precedent, and of course, that should exist. For me, I'm so weary of any sort of punitive, like kangaroo court type action, just given what happened in the campus cases. This is obviously a little bit different because it moves through a civil process. At the same time, you can basically bankrupt someone through these laws and dragging them through that. Of course, you know, it's going to rise to the courts to adjudicate whether it's legitimate or not, and then it's going to eventually fall with the jury. I have trust in the jury system generally within this, but it does seem that there are a lot of perverse incentives with some of this in terms of the money, in terms of the high, you know, all the Me Too accusations that we had seen previously that didn't bear out. So I have complicated feelings about this law. I'm curious what you think.
I think that's fair. Where I came to this, because I also was like, I'm not sure about this look back period and this year only, like what's the deal? Activists want more, right? They want there to be no statute of limitations, period. They want you to be able to, you know, continue to file these lawsuits. I felt like this was a reasonable middle ground because we also know that back in the day, I mean, all like Bill Cosby, how much did he get away with, right? There, Harvey Weinstein, like for years and years and years, if you had a claim against a powerful man, there was no way that you were going to be heard. There was no way that you were going to be able to achieve justice. So I felt like this was kind of a good compromise of, all right, we'll give you a year. We'll get rid of the statute of limitations. It'll only be civil, right? So we're not talking about criminal charges. We're not talking about people going to jail. But we are talking about some possibility for accountability. And there were roughly 2,500 lawsuits. So, you know, we're talking about the most high-profile examples, but there were 2,500 lawsuits that were filed here. A lot of them were also not against the people who did the sexual assault. A lot of them were also against institutions that knew that this was going on and kept this person in power and enabled the behavior, which I also support that level of accountability. So I agree with you. It's complicated, and especially when you throw Trump into the mix and, you know, raise the question of like, was this just an attempt to get Trump with the E. Jean Carroll stuff? But I feel like it was kind of a good middle ground to allow for the possibility of accountability. There were some additional examples here that you're going to be hearing about in the news that we wanted to raise with you because, as I said, a lot of powerful people were accused. Mayor Eric Adams put this up on the screen. He's been accused of sexual assault that was also filed under the jurisdiction of this law. The plaintiff in this case, we know very little about this one. No details, no idea whether there is anything to these claims at this point. But the plaintiff is a woman whose name is being withheld right now due to the nature of the allegation. She filed a summons on Wednesday night. It also names the Transit Bureau of the New York Police Department and the Guardian Association of the NYPD as defendants because it came during that time when Eric Adams was at the police department. So that's why they are also named as defendants in this case. That gets to what I was saying, Saagar, about how it's not just the people, it's also some of the institutions that allegedly enabled the behavior. Let's put the next one up on the screen. Disgraced former governor and noted Italian, Andrew Cuomo, sued for sexual assault by former executive assistant Brittany Camiso. Obviously, Cuomo has faced allegations previously, so this is not the first time he has faced these sorts of allegations. And I think these may have even been public previously. She alleges while she worked in the executive chamber as an executive assistant from 2019 through August 2021, her ex-boss subjected her to humiliating and demeaning tasks, hugs, kisses, sexual touching of the buttocks, and forcible touching of the breast. After she reported Cuomo's alleged conduct, then Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul demoted her, reassigning her to demeaning task of just answering the phone in the Lieutenant Governor's office until she was moved to other offices. So Cuomo, again, as I said, has faced some allegations in the past. He did that whole, wasn't it like a PowerPoint presentation about how it's all just because he's Italian and he's misunderstood. He also, at this point, so you got Mayor Eric Adams facing allegations, and he also was apparently interested in running for mayor of New York City. So anyway.
I don't think that's going to work out for Mr. Cuomo.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, it is. It was more interesting that they all just hit around the same time because that was what the look back period had within the law. Overall, it's obviously hitting quite a few other celebrities, by the way, not exempt. Let's put this up there on the screen. You also had Axl Rose, Jamie Foxx, and a few others that had allegations against the
Cuba Gooding Jr., who had faced allegations in the past.
That's right. That had come out previously, but it obviously was filed under the law as well. So this law certainly making some waves. Again, I have some complicated feelings, I think, about the implementation. I definitely agree with the institutional one. I actually think that one might be more important than any sort of, individual accusation and more, just because that was, I think, the primary disbelief on MeToo was not necessarily that like a creep like Harvey Weinstein was creep. It's that the Weinstein Company and all of Hollywood and an entire institution and system was protecting him. That's the same thing with Epstein. It's not a story that there's a rich guy who's a pedophile. It's that it was created as a system which arguably connected to foreign intelligence networks and was propped up and used for blackmail purposes that enabled real world things to then happen. Not erasing the victims, just saying why these matter from a big spotlight institutional level. So anyway, we'll see how this one works out. I'm curious actually on the Eric Adams piece, given how shady he is in the behind the scenes, whether he's not going to try and interfere in the process, because that actually could end up coming to bite him even more in the future.
Yeah, because he's going through it right now.
Yeah, with the
FBI seized his phones.
Right.
He denies any wrongdoing, and hasn't been charged or anything like that. So let's just be clear about where things stand. But never a good sign when the FBI is seizing your phones and raiding the offices of your top fundraiser. The allegations are that, they're looking into these potential corrupt ties to Turkey. And so, he's going through it with that. Obviously, he's under dramatic fire, including from Cardi B, which you missed the covering of that.
Don't worry, I saw it.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course I tuned in.
Huge cuts being made to the budget, and they're struggling to deal with an influx of migrants. He's sort of gone to war with the federal government over that. So it has not been smooth sailing for Mr. Adams. And again, I have no idea the veracity of these claims. We'll wait and see if any sort of evidence is produced, but not an easy time for him. No. One last thing I wanted to note here, just in terms of talking about what sort of suits have been brought under the jurisdiction of this law, because it's obviously not all famous people and powerful people, et cetera. Lawsuits also were filed on behalf of survivors who say they were sexually assaulted by former Columbia University gynecologist Dr. Robert Haddon. I don't know if you all remember the news reports about this. It was horrific. He was convicted of federal sex abuse charges in January. Columbia University will notify nearly 6,500 former patients of Haddon's conviction and sentence and provide information about its Survivor Settlement Fund, it said in a statement November 13th. So some of the alleged victims of and survivors of Dr. Haddon also were able to file suit under this law. So in any case, 2,500 suits filed. Some of them will be bogus, some of them will be legitimate, and obviously the ones regarding powerful people are going to get a lot of attention. We'll continue to follow.
They certainly will.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.